Okay, just a second. Just do a quick test over here. Okay, just a second. Just do a quick test over here. Looks good. Okay, everyone. So welcome back to Compositions Allies. My name is Barney. I'm the director of Compositions Allies. This is a channel for composers as well as performers interested in composition. As you know, I've been focusing very much on root position chords lately because I want to bring the glory of the French tradition of learning harmony to composers and performers around the world, because this is what really helped me to break through in terms of orchestration and fugue. When I was in America, I did many, many years, both in high school and college and grad school, uh, professional composition studies. I never felt limited as a composer, but then I began to see some major blocks when it came to orchestration, as well as definitely when it came to fugue. I just could not write a fugue no matter how many endless counterpoint studies I did. And then when I went to orchestrate my first symphony, Help Us Only for Orchestra, the first time around, I had no idea what I was doing, but I didn't realize I didn't have any idea I didn't know I was doing because I had had so much training. But training can be extremely incomplete. And what I find in America, though it is amazing for just composition itself, like if you go to Europe, they will not let you just compose whatever you want before doing all the prerequisite studies. But in America, we have the conservatories. It's, set up so it's easy to meet people, easy to make friends. You ask your friends to play your pieces. It's very organized. There's composer concerts. So for composition itself, America is exceptional. Okay, and you will not get that kind of education in France. Okay. Now I had to move to France to get the other side, to get the tradition, to get the le base, as we say in French. And I went specifically for harmony. I wanted to learn harmony in the French style, which is what we're doing on this channel. And then from there, I did orchestration, I did fugue, but really it was the harmony that got me to, let's say, liberation. Okay. So I am bringing this French harmony tradition to an English speaking audience. Unfortunately, most of the high quality texts available in France that are used this day that really contribute to a solid understanding of harmony, they have not been translated to English. Okay. So I'm building this course in which I am sifting through the text, but also kind of putting my own spin on it and putting it into English. And I'm building a paid as well as public course that I want to be available in the spring or the summer. And we're 2026. And for now, we're starting with the very base of the base of the base of the base, which is reposition chords. Okay. So here is an exercise we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 episodes, 3 or 4 weeks. Thank goodness. I think we're almost done. Okay. So let me go ahead and play the audio recording. Okay. So what we have is in French we call it un chant donné. Okay, so it's the melody that's provided. The soprano it has been provided, but we've looked for the bass and we filled in a lot of the middle voices. We filled in last episode, I think, the entire first phrase. And so this episode, we just need to kind of figure out the remaining voices. Okay. Now, just a very quick reminder of some basic concepts that we went over in previous episodes. I have made a short for each of these concepts so that it's easier for us to access this information. Okay, just resize my window real quick. So we have so I skipped something. Okay, voice and octave leap in soprano. Okay, so that was the focus of last episode. So just as a reminder, when you have a controversial soprano, you're going to have to do controversial things with the other voices, meaning lots of jumps, just you're gonna have to make jumps, okay? Now certain things are unacceptable. Parallel octaves, parallel fifths, you never can have them, okay? You got to have a complete chord, okay? But some of the other rules, no leaping. We don't want multiple voices leaping in the same direction, no crazy lips. We have to get a little bit lenient. So one of the things you have to do in harmony is you have to understand the hierarchy of importance. Not everything is equal. Equality is tyranny when it comes to music, because then it's just going to be all flat and you don't have organized music. Okay. So double check the YouTube shorts on my channel because I put a specific video summarizing how to voice octave lead in soprano. We also have the path of least resistance. This is something that I put to words, which I think for a lot of you, it's just common sense. You don't want, usually you don't want unnecessary movement in the voices. Okay, so if you can stay in the same note, you stay in the same note, etc. Just double check this video shorts tutorial if you're confused about what I mean by the path of least resistance, because I will be referring to back to these videos throughout the season. Finally, I think the most important shorts tutorial I've released since last week's episode is voice across two sections or phrases, okay? This is so ridiculously important, and I don't know how to prove it to you. I can just say it. You can believe me or you cannot believe me. Maybe I can do more videos just showing why it's so important. But I've already talked about this on the Orchestration channel as well as Fugue channel. Okay, so when you are doing a fugue, for example, you have to decide, okay, I'm having the second exposition. Okay, so that gets set first, and then I work backwards to create the counterpoint or the little transition to get in there. So you have to be fluid across two different sections. Definitely with orchestration, we've talked about this many times. I talk about working backwards and forwards. When you have two different sections, if you orchestrate one and you orchestrate the other, but you don't orchestrate between them, what you could have is a very bland orchestration or something that sounds great independently, but quand on enchaîne, we say in French, enchaîner, when you connect the two, it does not sound well. So this comes already from harmony. This is why we do harmony, so that when we do orchestration and fugue, so it is so much easier. It's still very difficult. Okay, I shouldn't say it's not easy. Okay, it's very difficult, but your mind is free to focus on like, okay, what's the global harmony? What are the different keys I'm trying to get to? How I'm gonna configure this counterpoint, okay? Or how am I going to balance the chord? How am I going to get the intervals I want? Your mind is free because the basic mechanics of voicing chords and the thinking process has been established through basic harmony exercises, starting with reposition chords, okay? So voice across two sections or phrases. In last week's episode, we deliberately put the ending of phrase one and the beginning of phrase two on the same line, just so we can make sure that the voice leading worked across the two. When we didn't do that, we got parallel fifths, okay? So those were the three basic concepts I just want to remind us all today. We're going to start with voicing the ending of this exercise. Okay, so we need to fill in the middle voices. Okay. And best place to start would be the very last chord. Okay. You want it to be well balanced. You want it to sit in a good register. So you're going to place the last chord. I highly recommend when you're doing this on your own time, to try different possibilities. So, you draw the staff paper and draw some more below. Okay. And I think in a future video, I want to show you how I do it, because you may be surprised, though I show you all these tutorials. I do the same work that you're going to have to do. I look for multiple possibilities. I'm unsure at times what's the best one. Like, this is like really une recherche, we say in French. Une recherche. It means it's a deep study for beauty, okay, and for the best, the highest quality possible, okay? So here was the best voicing I found for the ending chord. Okay. And then once you have the ending chord, you just want to fill in the intermediary chords. Just make sure I didn't skip something. Okay. And so to fill in those intermediary chords, again, it's the path of least resistance, which I already presented. Okay. The other thing that I will be making a short tutorial on soon, again, I've already done it, but I'll do a reminder one, is bass moves by step. When bass moves by step, other voices move in opposite direction of the bass. It's as simple as that. Okay, this is the beauty of the French tradition. They make it super, 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 super simple. It's hard still, but it's super, super, super simple. Based on the nice steps, other voices move in opposite direction, except of course for the deceptive cadence, which the leading tone has to go up to the tonic. Okay, so I have now finished in, you know, 3 seconds. I have finished the ending of this exercise. Okay, now I want to talk about a super, 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 super duper important concept, and I have two examples, or I have an example from Bach in terms of fugue, okay, and I have an example from Beethoven from one of his symphonies to show you how important this is. Okay, so really pay attention, and you can let me know in the comments later if there's something that just, you really don't understand despite me explaining it multiple times, okay? So we have pedals on the dominant. So we're in D minor. Okay, so the dominant is an A major chord. And remember the tempo is kind of fast, like da 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 da. Okay, so the dotted half note is getting the beat. And as you can see in this voicing, I chose something rather simple and direct. So on the first beat of harmony of A, E, C sharp, so we have a complete chord. And the other notes just hold until they get to the next chord. The soprano is the sole voice that is moving. Okay. Do, la, do, re. Okay. So technically, we could say on the second beat here that we have incomplete harmony because notice that the chord here is A, E, A. We don't have a C sharp. However, you have to also think about in French, we call it le rythme harmonique, okay, the harmonic rhythm. How frequently is the harmony changing? What is the pacing? And because of the faster tempo, this absence of the third here is not going to be noticed. So therefore, instead of trying to do some messy process of like revoicing it just for that second beat, you probably are going to want just a simple hold in the other voices. Okay? All right. Now, what I want to show you in French, we call this les notes frappées. Okay, frappé means struck. Okay, and I haven't found a good translation in English for the moment, unfortunately. So here I took the same chord, same harmony, and instead of just having the soprano moving, I had all the other voices moving. I mean, they're not moving to different notes, but they're marking the time. This is unacceptable because we are definitely going to hear the absence of that C sharp on this middle beat. Also, it's going to be kind of heavy. But most importantly, the kind of beauty and la souplesse, as we call in French, the lightness that we had prior is taken away, and we're kind of throwing in the listener's face the fact that we're missing the third. Okay? So unacceptable. Okay, so here I put quarter note equals, so meaning the beat instead of like da 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 da, it's like da da da, right? So we have the beat is really moving by the quarter, in which case there is going to be an actual change of harmony for each beat. Okay, French would say un véritable changement de l'harmonie. Love the French. Okay, they make it so simple and so clear. So notice here that to compensate for the absence of the C sharp on the second beat, I had the tenor go up to the C sharp and then go back to the A. Okay. And we actually have a term for this, which is voice exchange, which I usually we wait to talk about voice exchange until until we get to first inversion chords, but it is, voice exchange. Don't have to focus on it too much right now. But basically, I've made sure that this chord is complete because this is a slower tempo. Okay, notice that we have the A and the E for the other notes, so we do have a complete chord the entire time. Now, this is a good solution if it's a slower tempo. However, you have to also think at a larger, you have to think in many different ways. So I pointed out that we have a perfect fifth between the bass, and the alto. This is not a problem, okay? There's no parallel fifth or anything like that. That's not a problem. But I personally, when I hear this harmony, even though it's the upper male voice and the upper female voice, okay, the tenor and the soprano that are moving, that have the musical interest, that fifth for me is pretty solid, okay? And it definitely for me, I really hear that fifth. And the fifth, like in my own music, I love like fourths and fifths and like very rustic intervals. But when it comes to harmony, we're learning a very tonal, the very classical tonal, Mozart, Bach, like it's just very, very clean. And having that fifth outline in such a stark way, it could be un peu gênant, as we say in French. It just can be a little bit unpleasant. So these are some of the things that are at your disposal to think about. But it shows the beauty of harmony because it's not even about it's really about hearing acutely. That's what I think harmony ultimately is. Yes, it is about liberation for fugue. It is about liberation for composition. It's about liberation for orchestration. But ultimately, it's kind of getting a harmonic ear, so you can hear the doublings you want. You can hear the la précision, we say in French, the precision. Okay, so because this is a faster tempo, I'm going to stick with the first choice that we have, do, la, do, re, where the other notes are just holding, and then we have that absence of the third on the second beat, but it's not noticed by the listener. And this is just lighter and it's simpler, and we're not, making the voices move, just to compensate when they don't have to compensate. Okay, so I want to show you the application for Fugue, and then I'm going to show you the application for orchestration. I hope my audio is going to work because I had to specifically prepare these in Sibelius. So we're going to look at an excerpt from Bach. This is an organ work, the 540. It's the toccata, so the first part, and this is in F major, and we can see the C. If we have a prolonged C like that, it's got to be the dominant. There's no other explanation. Okay, so let me go and test my excerpt. Okay, I think that worked. Doesn't play for me, but it should have worked for you. Okay, you can let me know. I'll check later, see if it worked. Okay, so that is an organ work. Okay, now just so you know, if you actually do choose to look up this piece, he hasn't notated on three staves, which would be standard for organ, but for the purposes of this course, I wanted to really make it clear and have four separate staves, which I really like to do for fugue. Okay, so notice that we're on the dominant. Okay, and now I want to show you a kind of harmonic clarification. This is a little bit dizzy for the eyes, but I really want you to see on the downbeats, okay, we have really clear harmony, right? We have C, G, B flat, dominant seven, easy peasy. We have C, E, C, A. So we basically kind of have maybe an A minor chord. This is, it's very common to have pedals. Okay. Then we have D, F, B natural, G. So we have a dominant seven over the C. Okay. So what I want to show you is notice that on the downbeat, he has the clear harmony. Okay. But notice, like, for example, do you see this B natural here in the soprano? But notice in the voice below, technically the alto that's pretty low, the B natural is occurring, just right before, and then it jumps away. But notice, for example, the F here in the soprano, okay, despite what's going on with the B natural jumps to, then it resolves to the E, then it goes down to the D. So there is a clear logic when he's doing this pedal on the dominant. So the reason that we study harmony, okay, is not because we want to hear a harmony exercise. There's no one wants to program it, okay? We don't want to hear, okay? But it's so you just understand the basic functioning of a dominant, of a pedal, okay? You've tried different versions of, changing the notes or keeping the notes the same, and then you can do actual music. The goal of harmony is liberation, okay? It's just to have freedom when you compose, to have freedom when you orchestrate, have freedom when you do fugue, okay? Be really careful that you don't try to apply the things you're learning in harmony directly to your own composition or to your fugue or your orchestration, because probably you'll misapply or you'll create something that's very boring. The true goal is to just get these mechanics to just iron out all these problems, to forget about it, and then it shapes your subconscious, okay? I want to show you an example for orchestration. Okay, does anyone know what piece this is? Oh no, it's over here. I was going to make people guess. Okay, so this is Beethoven's Second Symphony. I love the Second Symphony, so good. Oh, they're all good except the first. So I said it. Okay, so the Second Symphony is super awesome. Okay, it's first movement, and this is towards the end of the development. Okay, now right away, I know that well, I don't know if it's immediately obvious that we're in a dominant, but in this section, we're kind of in a G minor, okay, and then it ends up in G major. But we see a prolonged duration on that D. Let me go ahead and play the excerpt. So good. Okay, so let me go and show you the harmonic indications I wanted to show you. Okay, so notice we have this first chord, right? Very flush, very plump. Okay, we have a full chord. For example, oboes have the F sharp, bassoons have the F sharp, violin two has the F sharp. So we have a full complete chord. But here I have marked areas where we don't have a complete chord. Okay. So, for example, here we have lots of D's, okay, and the violas, cellos, and double basses being held, okay, but we have an A and we have the D being held, but we don't have an F sharp, okay. In addition, on this chord here, okay, we don't have the F sharp either, maybe not even the A, okay. And throughout, if you look at this, you'll see there's moments, brief moments, where the key notes that we need to understand this harmony are absent. But why does it work? Well, the tempo is very quick, right? And we had but it's not just it's really quick. It was on the downbeat. We had a really clear downbeat with really clear harmony. So thereafter, the listener doesn't need to have every note of the chord represented every second. Okay, and that actually would create une orchestration très lourde, as we say in French, very heavy and kind of unpleasant orchestration. Okay, so again, the reason that we're learning harmony, we learn about these things in harmony, is so that when you get to orchestration or fugue, that you just have freedom to just work on like the hard, cool, fun stuff, like orchestrating the intervals or orchestrating the entire passage. So there's not too many things on your plate. So if you are thinking of orchestrating or doing fugue, okay, keep at it. Ultimately, you have to make it happen. You have to work with whatever level you have. You can't just put your life on hold to go back to harmony. But the long-term investment to just really iron out a lot of problems is to do harmony exercises in the French style. And you can do them on my website. I have them posted and you can check the tutorials if you need help figuring them out. Okay, let's continue. All right, so now we're going to voice the last phrase. Okay, and you'll notice that we're missing this chord here, so the six, and then we're missing another pedal on the dominant. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? It's two in one exercise. It's very crazy. Okay. So we have basically two different chords we have to fill in. Though we know that the pedal and the dominant could be a little tricky. Okay. But we also have the deceptive cadence, right? We have the five going to a six. So this is part of the hierarchy of importance that I want to, at some point very soon, I think I need to do a short tutorial on what exactly I mean in all the scenarios, because as you're seeing, not everything, equality is tyranny when it comes to music. It cannot be that everything's equal. It will sound very, very flat. There has to be certain things that are more important. Okay, so we have the types of cadence, we have the pedal on the dominant, but which is more important? We can't work kind of, I guess we can kind of work on them side by side, but I would say the deceptive cadence is more important, okay, because it's a cadence. Cadences are part of the larger form, okay? So I would suggest we voice the deceptive cadence. Okay, now granted, there's three beats we have to figure out, so it's kind of hard not to factor in the pedal on the dominant, but I would say we're going to figure out the deceptive cadence first, and then we're going to figure out the pedal on the dominant. Okay? So it's very simple. Deceptive cadence, you double the third. Okay? Double third, double third, double third. Okay? Double third. Okay? That's the beauty of the French tradition. They make it super, super, super simple. You know, obviously these rules exist for everyone, but for some reason the French are really good at putting it and codifying these rules. So you double a third. What that means is the leading tone needs to go up to the tonic. So we have the tenor is going up to the D, C sharp, the D, okay? And the other voices have to move in opposite direction to the bass. Okay, they have to. They have to. Okay, otherwise you're gonna have fifths and octaves. You can check my tutorial on this if you really want in-depth training how to voice deceptive cadence. Okay, you'll notice I haven't put any exercises to practice the deceptive cadence, just deceptive cadence, because in harmony in French tradition, you have to be thinking minimum at the phrase level. Otherwise, because anyone can fake a deceptive cadence. If I give you this rules and just present, okay, and I say this is a deceptive cadence, anyone can do it. Well, anyone that very basic level, okay, anyone can do it. But the real necessity is to start thinking at the phrase level, which is why I haven't done exercises just the deceptive cadence. Okay, so if you want to practice deceptive cadence, you have to do a full exercise or at least a phrase. Okay, and for now, the exercises I'm doing on the website are not too long. Okay, some of the earlier ones are maybe 4 or 8 beats. Okay, so that's not that much, right? But if you're just watching the videos and you enjoy them, great. That's great. That's great. I'm glad. I'm very happy. But unfortunately, the learning is extremely shallow. You have to do the work. You have to experience it because the other things come up. Okay. So the deceptive cadence is properly voiced. One quick tip that I've talked about in this video, but just to remind you, is a quick check is one of the voices moves by step. Other voices is going to leap down. Okay. And I see that visually, so I know I voiced the deceptive cadence correctly. Okay, here I wanted to show you some poor realizations of the deceptive cadence so we could learn together. Okay, so in this example, the tenor is just placed too high. Okay, so the tenor has been placed, and also you'd have to, how would you even get, you have to think about how would you get into the sixth? Have to come from the G, I guess. Or the A, sorry. The tenor is placed too high, okay? And we know because afterwards it has to jump down a fifth, okay, to get to its note. Notice that the alto didn't have much room. It has to jump down. And that's actually causing the most egregious aspect. Remember, the hierarchy of importance, certain things are more important. We have parallel octaves. This is completely unacceptable. Okay, here we have another example, and just visually, we can see there's many problems. Though I pointed out the problems, so that's probably why. Okay, so the tenor is on an A. It's forming 2 octave distance with the bass. This is just not acceptable. It's la manie très vide, we say in French. It is going to feel really empty. It's going to feel like you have a fifth or sixth voice that is absent that needs to be filled in. This is way, way too large. Okay. Now, perhaps on certain instruments, like depending how it works on a piano and how you do it, there are times it works, right? But that's a very homogeneous texture. And here we're really looking at voices, okay? On the organ, maybe that could work in a temporary if it's contrapuntal. But we're just focusing the most basic, which is voices, okay? That was the first instrument. And this is just way too large, okay? Now, because of this spacing, that's way too large, we get also of other problems. Notice that the alto is not resolving its leading tone C sharp to the D. So therefore, we get the augmented second, which is a band interval. So you see what happens when you do bad voicing, you just get lots of problems, okay? They all follow you. And also notice we just haven't fixed this existential problem of the parallel octaves with the alto and bass. Oh, one other thing I want to point out is you can also just tell visually it's just something's wrong because why is the tenor doing these crazy leaps, right? A to an F, then down to a B flat. That's like the distance of a seventh. Then I guess you can go to the octave with the A. It's just like it's just not the best fit, the best choice. Okay, here is another possibility. Okay, or sorry, this is an impossibility. Okay. Now, I will say that the Deceptive, it was voiced well, okay, because notice we have the septive cadence here, we have the doubled third, octave, soprano, and alto. We have the fifth in the bass and tenor. So it's going to be nice, dark, lush, really nice. Okay. But unfortunately, the distance from the soprano to the alto is way too large, and it's going to feel like a note's missing. Probably the A needs to be in. It's just going to feel incomplete. Okay. So for a harmony exercise, this may not work. Now, again, be careful because when you go to compose, you may have configurations like this and they may work perfectly fine. So be careful of don't let the voices that are actively guiding you when it comes to harmony. You can't do this, you can't do that. You got to make sure that they're not still present when you're trying to compose, and especially fugue. Okay, fugue especially, those voices will haunt you, and you're not going to be able to compose something beautiful. Okay, as well as for orchestration. Okay, so we have one beat left to do for the exercise. Let's make it happen. Okay, so we have this dominant here. Okay, we're D minor, so it's a major chord. It's got to fill in this note. Now notice that we have a leading tone, okay, which we're going to get into. Okay, so in this voicing here, which was based on a previous solution that we had for another pedal in the dominant, we have a major problem. Notice that we have a double leading tone, right? Because the tenor is holding the C sharp, and then the soprano is passing through the C sharp. This is what we call in French une équivoque. Okay, so there's some ambiguity. This could work. It could work. It could, depending on the speed. I think we have to do some scientific testing to figure out does the audience hear does it hear the double leading tone. But it's probably there's a better way to figure this out. Okay, so I bring this to your attention. This is something you really probably want to avoid. Okay, here we have what I called earlier les notes frappées. Okay, I haven't found a good translation from French for that. Okay, but it's you're just instead of just holding the notes, you're hitting each note. Okay, it sounds more violent in English. So here it becomes really obvious. This is definitely not acceptable. Okay, we definitely hear the leading tone in the tenor and in the soprano. So this definitely, I think we can all agree, you can't have in your exercises. Okay, so just to show you what happens when we have this double leading tone, even though it's very temporary, but notice the trajectory of the soprano. It goes la do mi re do re. It goes from C sharp to the D. Tenor does C sharp to the D. Now, soprano may try to fool us, but try to trick us for a second because it then goes to the E and then goes to the D. So it looks like the tenor and soprano are getting to that D, an octave, in opposite direction. But that is a fallacy because ultimately we see it's coming from the C sharp. Okay? So not acceptable. Okay? So here is the just common solution is you gotta revoice. Okay? You gotta revoice. And th- okay. So what I did here is I put the fifth root and third. Okay. I indicated what partials of the chord the notes were on. And notice that I had to move the other notes. So the tenor definitely had to leave from the C sharp. So I put it on the E. Okay. And then I did not want a doubled fifth. We've talked about that on this channel. That can create a lot of problems. So then I had the alto go up to the A. And then for this beat here, which is mark, the soprano is on the E. So notice that we have the alto on the A and the C sharp in the tenor. So I've made sure for every single beat that we have complete harmony and we make sure we're doubling the root for a dominant. Definitely you don't want you gotta double the root because if you're doubling the you can't double the leading tone, then the fifth often leads to parallels. Okay. So the solution was to just revoice the chord. All right. So we have successfully completed the exercise. Thank the Lord. Okay, we spent way too long on this exercise, but there were a number of things we had to focus on. Remember, we had that octave leap in the soprano, which was incredibly difficult to figure out, but we figured it out. Spoiler alert, you should probably expect an octave leap in the bass coming sometime in the new year. Gotta do it, and the solution might be very different. Also, we have the recognizing the same harmony, okay, with the pedal and the dominant, and how to voice the pedal and the dominant. These are two really, really important skills that we got in this exercise. So hopefully you were doing the work. If you want to pursue this work and follow me in the next episode for next week, then I will be posting this shortly on the website. This is a bastone. What that means is a provided bass line, okay? And I would like you to find the soprano. And as a recommendation, you may want to test out the middle voices because it's possible that you create a soprano that sounds nice, but then when you try to realize it later, it won't work at all. If you want to have this work corrected, then I will put a deadline. It's a very strict deadline because I need time to prepare for the live tutorial. But if you want this work corrected, and you have to do it in full, of course, do the entire soprano. You can handwrite it if you want and test the middle voices. Send in time for the deadline, and I will be happy to review it in the next live tutorial.